My friend Daniel called me in March 2020. He was panicking. He said, "I just lost $40,000 in 3 days. What do I do?" I told him to stop looking at his portfolio. He didn't listen. He sold everything at the bottom. And I watched him walk away from what would have become $190,000 by December of that same year. That phone call changed the way I think about money forever. Because what Daniel didn't know, what most people never learn, is that market crashes are not the end of wealth. They are the beginning of it. And today I want to show you exactly why that is true, how it works, and what separates the people who come out of crashes richer from the people who come out of crashes broke. Let's start with a number. In March 2020, the S&P 500 dropped 34% in just 33 days. It was the fastest crash in American stock market history. Trillions of dollars vanished on paper. Retirement accounts were bleeding. News headlines were screaming. People were terrified. But here is what happened in the background that nobody was talking about. While Daniel was selling, a man named Chris, someone I met at a financial conference 2 years later, was buying. Chris was 38 years old, working as a mid-level logistics manager in Ohio. He had $67,000 saved across his brokerage account and a small emergency fund. He was not rich. He was not a Wall Street insider. He had no special information. But he had one thing Daniel didn't have. He had a plan. When the crash hit, Chris didn't look at what he was losing. He looked at what he could buy. He took $42,000, almost his entire investable savings, and deployed it between March 16 and March 23, 2020. He bought index funds. He bought beaten-down blue-chip stocks. He bought a few REITs when real estate was being thrown out the window. He didn't try to time the exact bottom. He just kept buying as the market kept falling. By the end of 2021, that $42,000 had turned into just over $34,000. Not because Chris was a genius. Not because he had a secret strategy. Because he understood something fundamental about how wealth transfers during a crisis. And this is the core of everything I want you to understand today. Crashes don't destroy wealth, they transfer it. The money doesn't disappear into thin air. It moves from the hands of the fearful into the hands of the prepared. Think about it this way. When you sell a stock at $30 that you bought at $80, you feel like you lost $50. And technically, yes, you did. But someone on the other side of that trade just bought it at $30. When that stock recovers to $90, you lost $60 and they made $60. Same stock, same company, same economy, two completely different outcomes based entirely on one decision made during a moment of fear. This is the transfer. And history shows it happens every single time. Let me give you the data because I don't want you to just believe me. I want you to see it. The 2008 financial crisis wiped out $19.2 trillion in household wealth in the United States. People called it a once-in-a-generation disaster, and for those who sold, it was. But Warren Buffett deployed $15.2 billion between September and December of 2008 alone. He bought Goldman Sachs, he bought General Electric, he bought Bank of America preferred shares. By 2013, those investments had returned an estimated $10 billion in profit. He didn't have better information than everyone else. He just wasn't afraid. He said in a New York Times op-ed at the time, and I'm paraphrasing, "I haven't the faintest idea what the stock market will do in the next month or the next year. But I know this. In the next 10 years, stocks will be higher than they are today." That's not a prediction. That's a philosophy. And that philosophy is the engine behind almost every crash-era wealth story I have ever come across. Now, let me tell you something that most finance content won't tell you. The opportunity in a crash is not just in stocks. When markets crash, real estate follows. And when real estate crashes, people who are already building cash positions get access to properties at prices that change their net worth permanently. After 2008, home prices in cities like Phoenix, Arizona dropped by as much as 56%. Las Vegas saw a 62% decline from peak to trough. People who had capital, people who had positioned themselves to wait, walked into those markets and bought properties at prices that hadn't been seen in decades. Some of those same properties are now worth 3 and 4 times what they were bought for in 2010 and 2011. Not because those buyers were lucky, because they were ready. Back to Chris for a second. When I sat down with him at that conference, I asked him how he had the courage to deploy $42,000 when everything looked like it was falling apart. He said something I have never forgotten. He said, "I didn't think about whether the market was going to go up. I thought about whether Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft were going to be around in 10 years. And when I felt certain they would be, buying at a 35% discount felt like the most obvious thing in the world." That's the mindset. It's not bravery, it's clarity. And clarity only comes when you separate emotion from analysis. Here's an interesting fact that most investors never learn. According to data from JP Morgan's Guide to the Markets, if you missed just the 10 best trading days in the S&P 500 over the last 20 years, your returns dropped from about 9.8% annually to just 5.6%. Now guess when most of those best days occurred? Right in the middle of the worst crashes. The best single day in 2020 came on March 24th, right at the height of the panic. The market jumped 9.38% in a single session. The investors who had already sold missed that entire move, and that one day alone made up a disproportionate percentage of the year's total return. This is the cruel irony of fear-based investing. You sell to protect yourself, and you end up protecting yourself out of the gains. Now let me talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough. The psychology of a crash is designed to make you sell. I don't mean that in a conspiratorial way. I mean it in a biological way. Your brain, when faced with financial loss, activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Research from neuroscientist Camelia Kunin at Northwestern University found that people who experienced financial losses became significantly more risk-averse in subsequent decisions, even when the rational choice was to take more risk. So the moment the market drops and you feel that pain, your brain is actively working against your financial interest. It is telling you to run. It is telling you to sell. It is telling you that more pain is coming. And the people who become millionaires during crashes are the ones who have trained themselves, either through knowledge, experience, or a written investment plan, to override that signal. Chris had a written investment plan. He had written down before the crash exactly what he would do if the market dropped 20%, 30, or 40%. He had predecided. So when March 2020 arrived and everything started falling, he wasn't making a decision under pressure. He was following a plan he had already made in a calm state of mind. That's the tactical difference. That's what separates reaction from strategy. Let me give you one more layer to this. The people who build wealth in crashes are not just the people who buy stocks. They're the people who buy skills, businesses, and talent at discounted prices. In 2009, companies were laying off engineers, marketers, and executives by the thousands. Smart founders were starting companies with that talent at salaries they could never have afforded in 2006 or 2007. Airbnb was founded in 2008. Uber was founded in 2009. WhatsApp was founded in 2009. Slack, in its earlier form, came out of a company that was restructured during the downturn. These weren't accidents. Crashes reduced the cost of everything. Labor, real estate, equipment, advertising. The barrier to entry on almost every kind of business goes down when the economy contracts, and the entrepreneurs who move during that window come out on the other side with cost structures that their competitors who started in good times could never match. This is why a disproportionate number of the companies on the Fortune 500 today were either founded or made their most aggressive moves during recessions. It's a pattern. And patterns in finance, when you recognize them, are some of the most powerful tools you can hold. Now I want to bring this back to you because all of this means nothing if it stays abstract. The question is not whether the next crash is coming. It is. The question is whether you will be ready when it does. And ready doesn't mean having $500,000 in the bank. Chris had $67,000. Ready means having a plan. Ready means having some dry powder. Cash that you haven't deployed yet, sitting and waiting. Ready means knowing which assets you would buy, at what price, in what order. Ready means having done the work before the fear arrives, because when the fear arrives, it is too late to think clearly. Daniel never did that work. He wasn't a bad investor because he panicked. He panicked because he hadn't prepared. He had no plan, so his emotions became the plan. And emotions in a falling market will always tell you to sell at the worst possible time. There's a quote from the legendary investor John Templeton that I think about constantly. He said, "Bull markets are born on pessimism, grown on skepticism, mature on optimism, and die on euphoria." Think about what that means. The moment everyone is most pessimistic, the moment it feels the most hopeless, is the moment the next bull market is quietly being born. The people who see that are not smarter than everyone else. They've just read history carefully enough to know that the pattern repeats. And it always has. After every single crash in American market history, 1929, 1973, 1987, 2000, 2008, 2020, the market came back. Every single time. Not always quickly, not always smoothly, but always. And the people who held, who bought, who built, they came out the other side with more than they started with. Daniel eventually came back into the market in late 2021, near the top of the bull run. He bought back in at prices higher than where he sold. And then in 2022, when the market corrected again, he felt that fear all over again. The last time we spoke, he told me he was starting to understand. He said, "I think I've been playing the wrong game." And he's right. Most people are. They're playing the short-term game, reacting to headlines, chasing performance, running from fear. But wealth is built in the long-term game. And the long-term game rewards exactly one thing: preparation during calm and discipline during chaos. If you take nothing else from today, take this. The next time markets crash, and they will, the question you need to ask yourself is not, how much am I losing? The question is, how much can I buy? Because somewhere in that crash, a transfer is happening. And every transfer has two sides. Which side you're on is entirely up to you.